A week before Christmas in Cleveland, I stood in my small kitchen and heard my own son say, clear as sleet on glass, just dump all 9 kids on her, while my prepaid catering invoices sat clipped beneath a magnet. On December 24th, when he called asking, "Where are you?" I watched snow spiral across St. Clair Avenue and said, "Don't wait for me, or the gifts, or the catering I paid for," and the silence on his end finally told the truth. You're watching Revenge Files. Subscribe for a new twist daily. I was 56 that winter. A medical billing coordinator at Metro Health in Ohio City, the kind of job that teaches you to count everything: co-pays, deductibles, hours, breaths. My son Daniel was 34, a former HVAC tech who decided management suited him better than crawling into attics. He married young, divorced hard, and remarried faster than I knew how to process. Between his 2 marriages and the whirlwind of stepchildren, half-siblings, and weekend custody swaps, there were 9 kids orbiting him like noisy moons. I loved those kids as if the names on their birth certificates didn't matter. I also loved my back, my knees, and my paycheck. The plan, as he pitched it in October, was modest. I'd reserve a community room at the Collinwood Recreation Center, hire Lake Effect Catering to handle mac and cheese, roasted chicken and green beans, and buy gifts, books and winter boots mostly, so no one went cold. I agreed, because that's what I did when someone said family and then paused for my wallet to speak. But then, I heard him in my kitchen on December 17th, voice clipped and confident, as if logistics were harmless. He wasn't talking to me. He'd taken his call on speaker while picking up a box of gift wrap I'd offered. "Just dump all 9 kids on her," he said to someone. Kelsey, his second wife, judging by the size. "She's paying for the food anyway." The words landed like ice in my stomach. My shift on the 24th was a firm 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Nurses needed billing cleared before the holiday. I could not absorb 9 children, not safely, not legally, not with my sanity intact. I rinsed a mug I didn't need to rinse. I kept my voice level. "You need to pick up that wrapping paper and go," I said when he clicked off. His smile ran late to his eyes. He kissed my cheek, thanked me, and left with the same casual disregard he'd used to propose turning me into a free daycare. The door closed. The house held its breath. One problem: I'd already put down deposits. $500 to the city to reserve the room. A $2,400 deposit to Lake Effect Catering, balance due at delivery. About $1,350 on gifts, mostly ordered online. I also had 9 stockings stitched with names, a silly tradition that tasted sweet until it didn't. I clicked the magnet and pulled down the catering contract. Clause 4. Cancellation with 90% refund if made by end of business, 3 business days before the event. December 20 by 5 p.m. The clock began to tick in my ears. I sat at my small dining table, opened a spiral notebook, and dated the top of the page, December 17th, 2022. I listed what I'd heard, word for word. I recorded the time from the stove clock, 4:46 p.m. I saved the note to my phone and sent it to my email. I learned years ago that memory is a kind of weather. It changes if you don't pin it down. Except, I needed more than notes. Ohio allows one-party consent for recording your own conversations. I wasn't going to wire the house like a crime drama, but I could, at minimum, keep the receipts that most families throw away. Texts, emails, payment confirmations, and the shape of a pattern. It wasn't revenge yet, it was an audit. I started with money. I opened Fifth Third Bank's app and scrolled through my credit card statements. October, $318 for a costume set Daniel had sworn he'd reimburse. He hadn't. November, $210 for a team fundraiser that somehow posted to my card after he accidentally used it at checkout. I highlighted the charges, printed the pages, and slid them into a blue binder under a tab that said Daniel's debits in my handwriting. It looked petty until you realized petty had a cumulative price. The gifts came next. I opened a box of boots in 3 sizes and thought about slush puddles and bus stops. This was the only part that hurt, because gifts weren't the children's fault. I set the boots aside and kept one thing for each kid, a paperback, wrapped in neutral paper. The rest I returned, documenting the refunds. Lake Effect Catering was more delicate. I sent an email the night of December 17th, asking about redirecting the order to a shelter if we canceled. The owner, a woman named Patrice, replied on the morning of the 18th. We can reassign to St. Augustine Hunger Center or City Mission. 90% of your deposit refundable. 10% service charge. She even added, I'm sorry if it's a family thing. Holidays cut both ways. But then, my phone buzzed. Group chat, Martinez family Christmas. A message from Kelsey, my daughter-in-law since October, just confirming we're dropping all 9 kiddos at Mom's at noon on the 24th, with 3 heart emojis and a snowman. Before I could respond, Daniel added a thumbs up and a champagne bottle. I typed slowly, so I'd choose each word. I work 7 to 3 on the 24th. I will not be available to watch any children that day. Please make other arrangements. I reread it, looking for the apology women braid into simple sentences. I left it out. The chat went still. 10 minutes later, a private text from Daniel arrived. It's Christmas. Don't be like this. I stared at the screen, counted to 10. It's Christmas, I replied, which is why I'm being clear now. I'm not childcare. The event space is reserved for 5 p.m., food at 5:30. Adult supervision of all kids is required by the city's rules. I attached a screenshot of the facility's rental policy and the line about supervised minors. Daniel shot back, we'll be downtown by 6. You can handle a few hours. 9 is not a few. The number burned like a match head. On December 18th, after church at St. Casimir, I drove up East 152nd to the Cleveland City Mission and asked the volunteer coordinator if redirected catering would help. The man at the desk, thin and patient, said, Holiday meals are poured out fast. Yes. I asked for a letter acknowledging future delivery. He typed one and printed it with a kind smile. I folded the letter into my binder under a tab labeled Redirection. But then, the guilt arrived, wearing the soft sweater that mothers pull over bones. 9 kids with 9 expectations. I didn't want to punish them because their parents were careless with my time and money. I called Patrice on the 19th. If the family can't behave, I said, I want to send the food to those who will actually eat. She said yes. I forwarded her the city mission letter. She revised the invoice, refunding $2,160 of the deposit to my card, applying $240 service to the redirection, and noting a city mission delivery on December 24th at 5 p.m., the slot I'd reserved for my own party. The timing stung and soothed at once. I expected a blow-up. I got something colder. Silence from Daniel, silence from Kelsey, and then an Instagram story from their favorite downtown bar on December 20th. Maple Old Fashions against a window, captioned, Pre-game planning. Planning what, I didn't need to ask. Except, December 20th was also my cancellation deadline. I drove to the Collinwood Recreation Center with my receipt and filled out a cancellation form at the front desk. The clerk, a woman in her 20s with a bun and cherry nails, chewed gum and said, You're just inside the window, Ms. Martinez. 90% refund of the $500. So $450 back to my card within 7 days. I initialed 3 lines, signed 1, and took a stamped copy. On my way home, I stopped by my locksmith on East 185th. New deadbolt, new code on the side door keypad. Boundary, but with hardware. On the evening of the 21st, Daniel finally called. I let it ring twice. I hit record on voice memos and answered. Hey, Mom. He sounded like a man who'd been told to be nice. My spine tried to unlearn 34 years of pleasing. You saw my messages, I said. I won't be home to take children on the 24th. He huffed. We're counting on you. Counting like a biller counts, like a creditor counts. You've miscounted, I said. He went quiet, then tried the old pivot. We'll bring them at 2. You'll be off by 3. What's an hour? The arithmetic was hopeful. My heart was not. I kept my voice steady. Drop-off is a no. The party is canceled. The food is going to the city mission on my dime. The room was canceled today. A silence long enough for me to hear the heat kick on, then the anger. You're ruining Christmas, he said. I'm choosing where to spend, I replied. He hung up without a goodbye. I tapped stop on the recording and saved it as Daniel 12-21. It felt clinical, ugly, necessary. But then, nothing happened. December 22nd slid by under a pale sky. I worked a double to help a nurse who'd been up with a sick child. December 23rd brought lake-effect snow and my last grocery list for me alone. I bought oranges, cinnamon sticks, and a cheap ham, because you can love a thing without making it expensive. I set aside 9 books in a crate by the door. If any kid asked, those would be theirs. My phone stayed mostly dark. I tried to enjoy the quiet. It tasted like a promise I was afraid to swallow. On Christmas Eve, Metro Health's billing office was a row of blinking LEDs and donated cookies. I cleared counters, sent 4 late claims, and tucked my scrub jacket into my tote at 2:54 p.m. Outside, the cold bit my cheeks and the sky flurried. I checked my watch. If Daniel was going to be himself, he'd be early, except the first call on my phone wasn't him. It was Patrice. "We're loading for city mission," she said. "Our driver's Henry. He'll text you a photo when they receive." I thanked her, then stood for a moment at the employee entrance, where the wind tunneled. It felt good to know that chicken would be eaten without anyone sighing about my boundaries. I started my car, turned onto West 25th, and headed east. My Ring camera pinged at 3:22 p.m., a notification. Motion at front door. I pulled into a CVS lot and played the clip. A minivan dusted with dirty snow. Daniel in a beanie, Kelsey in a puffer, and 6 children visible in puffy coats. The older 3 must have been with their other parents. Kelsey wrestled with a toddler in a too big scarf. Daniel rang the bell, waited, then tried the keypad. 3 beeps, code changed. He glanced up, saw the camera, and his jaw worked once, twice. He said something I couldn't hear. He tried the handle. He turned to Kelsey, speaking with those exaggerated gentle motions people use when lying near children. Then he pulled out his phone. My phone rang a second later. "Where are you?" he asked, and there it was. The script he'd rehearsed aloud in my kitchen a week ago. I watched snow melt against my windshield, and said the line I'd earned. "Don't wait for me, or the gifts, or the catering I paid for." I ended the call. I sat in the CVS lot, soft hands shaking, and let my lungs refill. But then, he called again. I didn't answer. He texted, "We'll just leave them on your porch." My chest went cold. Leave them? In 26 degrees? I hit the non-emergency line for the Cleveland Division of Police and spoke clearly. "My adult son just threatened to abandon minors at my residence. I'm not home. I have a Ring camera and recordings. Can an officer do a welfare check to ensure no child is left unattended?" The dispatcher asked for address and details. I gave both. "We'll send a unit," she said. At 3:46 p.m., the Ring camera showed a patrol car pulling up behind the minivan. "Officer in a dark knit cap." He gestured. Daniel gestured back. Kelsey shrugged, then started buckling a toddler again. The officer knocked on my door. I spoke through the intercom, identified myself, and confirmed I was off-site. "They cannot leave the children," I said. "I've told them multiple times. I work until 3 and will not be home. Please advise them accordingly." He did. Daniel's anger had nowhere to go. He loaded the kids back into the van and drove off in a spray of slush. The officer tipped his cap to the camera like a man in a black and white movie. For a second, I wanted to cry. Instead, I drove to St. Augustine to help assemble trays. Except, families don't like boundaries. They prefer stories where the oldest woman is a gentle absorber of inconvenience. Around 5:10 p.m., while I was placing rolls on a tray 2 blocks from the hunger center's steaming line, my sister Anna called. "What did you do?" she asked, as if Christmas were a crime scene I'd contaminated. "I redirected food so it wouldn't be wasted," I said. "And I prevented an unsafe drop-off," she sighed. "He says you embarrassed them in front of the police. The desire to fix other people's reputations is a strong drug." I let the withdrawal tremble my hand. "He embarrassed himself," I said. "I have texts." Anna murmured something about making peace. I thought about how women are often asked to be the road other people walk on and call it peace. At 5:34 p.m., Henry texted a photo. Hotel pans on a stainless counter at City Mission, steam curling like ghosts. The text said simply, "Delivered." I stood in the parking lot behind St. Augustine, looked up at a violet sky, and allowed myself a small, private smile. But then, Daniel went from pressure to smear. On December 26, while I was working my post-holiday shift, an email popped into my personal inbox. Subject, Nanny invoice. It was from a woman I didn't know, CCing Daniel and Kelsey. She ran a small childcare agency in Parma. The email attached an invoice for $620, dated December 24th, with my name in the bill to line. Kelsey had forwarded it with, "As discussed, please remit." Mom canceled so she can pay for the sitter we had to hire. I stared at my monitor until the letters swam. They had not hired a sitter. I had video of them trying to leave the kids at my locked door. The lie was that special kind. The kind calibrated to seem plausible to anyone who didn't have receipts. I wrote back plainly, "I am not a party to your arrangement. Any invoice naming me as debtor is fraudulent. Please remove my name and do not contact me again." The agency owner replied, within minutes, mortified. "I was asked to draft a sample for their records, but not to send," she wrote. "I've removed your name and will not be involved." I saved that email. I printed it. I 3-hole punched it and slid it into my blue binder under a tab labeled false invoice. My hands shook with the combination of rage and relief that comes when a lie exposes itself in writing. One problem: this was now bigger than a ruined dinner. It was a pattern of using me as a budget line, as a default solution, as a faceless resource. I brought the binder to my dining table and added tabs: 1 deposits and cancellations, 2 texts and voice memos, 3 prior charges, 4 false invoice, 5 event policies, 6 police contact log. I wasn't going to scream into the void of family. I was going to draft a plan. In the top drawer of my desk, beneath a coil of ribbon and a bag of tea lights, lay the last paper my late husband Luis had insisted I sign, a small trust document for future grandchildren. We'd started it with $1,000, more symbolic than real, with language that allowed future gifts but barred distribution through any parent who used funds to punish or manipulate. "You decide what fairness looks like," he'd said in his even voice, years earlier, before his heart attack left me to decide alone. I took the trust out and read it twice. It hummed in my hands like a sleeping engine. Except, funding a trust isn't revenge, it's architecture. I wanted both. I emailed a small claims clerk at Cleveland Municipal Court on December 28th, asking what evidence to bring for a claim of reimbursement. The answer came back with a link and a sentence that was almost funny. "Bring anything that proves your side." I filled out a complaint that night, naming Daniel and Kelsey, requesting $3,980. Calculated. From the non-refundable portions of catering and room before I canceled in time, their prior charges they'd promised to reimburse, the locksmith fee, and the cost of the holiday gifts I had to return minus the refunds absorbed by restocking. I attached screenshots, emails, and the call log to the police. I requested service by certified mail. Filing fee, $95, paid online at 8:22 p.m. I wrote the hearing date in my planner when it posted 2 days later, January 25, 2023, room 13B. On January 1st, I wrote my family a letter. Not a group text, not a rant. A letter printed on plain paper that began, "This is a boundary, not a war." I spelled out what I would and wouldn't do. I would love the children, show up for scheduled events, and contribute to school supplies and coats. I would not host more than 3 kids at once, would not accept last-minute drop-offs, and would not be shamed into performing free childcare. I attached copies of the facility's policy on minors and a receipt for the city mission delivery. I ended with, "If you speak about me, please keep it true." I sent it certified to Daniel and to Kelsey's apartment on Denison Avenue because I knew digital words evaporate. Paper, like winter, leaves a record. But then, social fallout. A cousin posted a Facebook status about elderly relatives who sabotage Christmas. I was tagged indirectly by 3 people who know better than to name names. I did nothing. Doing nothing is sometimes the heaviest part of the plan. I went to work, I packed leftovers, I maintained the ledger of my own life. The hearing came on a bone-cold morning. January 25th, Lake Erie a gray sheet, the courthouse a bell jar of fluorescent light. Room 13B held 12 bodies and a judge with a last name no one pronounced the same way twice. I wore a navy suit I'd forgotten I owned and carried the blue binder like a spare rib. Daniel and Kelsey sat on the other side, whispering. He wore cologne I used to buy him at Christmas when the world was simpler than men. The judge called our case. I stood, palms dry thanks to a tissue in my pocket. "Ms. Martinez," the judge said, misreading that I'd kept my ex-husband's name after the divorce years ago. "Tell me what happened." I told the short version, because courtrooms like simple. I explained the plan for the holiday, the overheard sentence, the unsafely proposed drop-off, the cancellation within contractual windows, the police welfare check, and the false invoice. I did not cry. I did not apologize for the weather inside my voice. Then I laid out exhibits like a story told in paper. Exhibit A, the catering contract and Patrice's email. Exhibit B, the facility rental policy and cancellation receipt. Exhibit C, the Ring camera timestamps and still images of the attempted drop-off. Exhibit D, the group texts where I told them no. Exhibit E, the non-emergency police call log. Exhibit F, the email from the agency rescinding the false invoice and admitting it was drafted at Daniel and Kelsey's request. I slid each sheet across the small table with the quiet precision of someone clipping a vein. The judge turned to Daniel. He started with charm, pivoted to grievance, slid into claim. "She said she'd do Christmas," he said. "She's always done it." The judge lifted a hand. "Did she tell you, in writing, that she would watch the children on December 24th? Daniel paused. His eyes flicked to me. "Not exactly," he said. "She told us no," Kelsey added, voice sharp as tinsel. "But she didn't mean it." The judge's eyebrows climbed like cold balloons. "People generally mean it when they say no, Miss Hart," he said, finally using Kelsey's last name. "Show me your evidence." They had texts too, but the wrong kind. Screenshots of old year's plans as if tradition were a legal document. A calendar screenshot with Mom blocked out for 12 to 8, which the judge set aside like a child's drawing. The false invoice did them no favors. The judge held it between thumb and forefinger, squinting. "Why was her name on this?" he asked. Kelsey launched into a paragraph about fairness and the cost of a sitter. The judge tapped the rescinding email. "But you didn't hire one," he said. "You tried to leave the children at a locked home in winter, and you put your mother's name on an invoice anyway. That was deceptive." Except. My stomach still nodded when the judge told us he'd take a short recess to review. Recess felt like being sent into a school hallway where the word mother echoed too loudly. I watched Daniel whisper to Kelsey, his jaw tight, and recognized the boy who'd once begged me to call a teacher because a classmate had called him a crybaby. I also recognized the man who had called my availability an entitlement more than a kindness. Both images made me tired. We were called back after 11 minutes that felt longer. The judge returned to the bench and read from his notes, slow enough that each word set. On the evidence presented, "I find for the plaintiff, Ms. Martinez," he said. "I award $30,980 in damages and $95 in costs. This reflects non-refundable losses that reasonably flowed from defendant's actions and misrepresentations." He looked over his glasses. "And I strongly encourage the parties to establish appropriate boundaries regarding childcare. Court is adjourned." The gavel didn't crack. It simply landed, a small wooden certainty. I exhaled, then inhaled again. The clerk slid me a printed judgment. At the bottom, the line that mattered more than the money: judgment for plaintiff. Kelsey hissed unbelievable without looking at me. Daniel didn't speak. I left the courtroom before anything else could be thrown into the air. But then, judgments need teeth. By February 15th, no payment had arrived. I filed a form with the clerk asking for wage garnishment, attaching Daniel's employer info from a W-2 I'd found in a stack he'd left at my house in spring when he forgot to pick up his mail. It felt like a violation to use it and like a lesson not to be a sloppy boy. The garnishment order went out the last week of February. In March, $310 appeared in my account with the memo JGMT PMT. It wasn't fireworks. It was math doing its quiet job. Meanwhile, I used the small trust like a needle to stitch practical kindness. On March 1st, I opened 9 Ohio 529 accounts, $200 each. I wrote each child a note that said, "This is for something you'll build. Ask me about it when you're curious." I mailed the notes to their homes with a copy to their school's counselors. It felt sneaky and honest. It bypassed the folks who tried to weaponize my checkbook and aimed at the ones who would someday need bus fare to a future that smelled nothing like old fashions on a December night. Except, Daniel kept trying small doors. A tulip fundraiser accidentally run through my card in April. I called the school, reversed the charge, and asked them to remove my card from any saved profile. A Mother's Day brunch reservation that just needed my deposit in May. I smiled at the hostess at the Marble Room and told her to cancel that booking if she saw my name appear without my voice confirming. The hostess lowered her voice and said, "We see this sometimes." I believed her. Summer softened us just enough that a family cookout became possible in July at Euclid Beach. Daniel came late, Kelsey came later, and the kids ate watermelon like they were on a commercial. I watched them run, each with a different stride, and thought about how children don't ask to be weapons in petty wars. I handed out library cards I'd applied for and their names with notes on the back about summer reading prizes. No one could say I'd stopped loving. I had simply started loving with rails. The mid-roll surge of our year arrived in September, when Kelsey called me in tears. "Daniel's hours got cut," she said. "The garnishment makes our rent tight." It was the exact phone call designed to pry my wallet back open through the vent called mercy. The part of me that changed diapers without complaint stirred in her chair. The part of me that stood in a courtroom with a blue binder held steady. "I'm sorry that's happening," I said, and meant it. "I can bring groceries for the kids this weekend." There was a beat of silence. "We need cash," she said. I nodded even though she couldn't see it. "I'm not giving cash." The click was louder this time. But then a small thing changed. On a Saturday in October, my oldest granddaughter, Mariah, 12 and observant, called me herself. "Grandma, can you teach me to make arroz con pollo?" she asked, voice careful. I said yes and told her to bring a notebook. She came with her hair in a top knot and her cardigan sleeves pushed to her elbows. Together, we measured rice and bit a pepper to test its heat. She wrote down ratios and whispered, "I didn't think you were serious about the 529 thing." I showed her the printout, with her name. Her eyes widened. "It's small now," I said. "It grows the way good things do, because you keep adding." She nodded like a person learning a different religion. Thanksgiving came and went with a table at my house for whoever was civil. Daniel texted the morning of to ask if he could bring extra guests. "Please don't," I replied. "Seats are counted." He said nothing further, which was better than too much. After dessert, I pulled out the crate of 9 books that had sat by my door since last December and handed them to small hands. "I kept these for you," I said. "They were always yours." The looks on faces told me a strange truth. Sometimes withholding in one place makes room for a gift that lands. The room exhaled. On December 24th, a year later, the sky was again white with intention. I woke to an alarm I'd set even though I didn't work that day. Old habits are stubborn. I drove to St. Augustine again with a tray of cookies and a check for the kitchen, not an apology but a period. While I was wrapping plastic around a tray, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "We're doing a small thing at our place," it read. "No expectations. If you want to stop by for an hour, kids would like to see you." I stared at the words and searched them for the shape of a trap. It looked bizarrely like an invitation without a chain attached, except, "Trust doesn't regrow because a text tries to plant it." I replied, "I can stop by at 2. I'll stay for an hour." He sent a thumbs up. I drove over at 2, parked on Denison, and walked up the salted steps. Kelsey opened the door with flour on her nose. The kids were loud and bright. There was store-bought sheet cake and a pot of chili on their stove. No bar plans on the counter, no calendar screen open on a phone with Mom blocked out like an oath. We did an hour. When I said I needed to go, no one argued. On my way out, Daniel followed me onto the porch. He stood with his hands in his pockets like a boy about to ask a teacher for mercy. "I was wrong last year," he said to the winter air. I thought you'd always be there without me having to ask, right?" He didn't say sorry. I didn't demand it. "I'm here like this," I said, drawing a small square in the air. He nodded. "I see that. It wasn't redemption, it was a map." Later that afternoon, I drove to the lake and watched gulls commit to the wind the way only gulls know how. I thought about the week before Christmas the year prior, about magnets and invoices and doors that stayed locked because I turned a key in time. Revenge, it turns out, can sound like redirecting food to people who won't weaponize it, like a judge reading a figure aloud, like a child calling for a recipe, like an hour defined and kept. When my phone rang at dusk and I let it go to voicemail, the silence on my end finally told the truth I'd been circling. I didn't need to show up where I was expected. I needed to show up where I chose.